one damn good guest to another. I see him in the background, the one and only Mark Sleboda, international relations security analyst. I often say, well, I'm not going to say truth and thing, but who's a damn good analyst. I'll just say it that way. One of the best in the business. You can find him on Boosty, Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda, or you can just look under the name Mark Sleboda, the way I found him. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay today?
Tomorrow, thanks for the shameless shill. I'm alive. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
And look, I would tell you this. I think my mom will back me up on this. I think she's probably in the chat. If I don't believe it, I'm not going to say it. There are plenty of people I bring on and says, here's this person, and we go into a conversation. So no, man, you have been one of the most accurate analysts that we've come across. And when I tell people like Richard Wolff that they've affected my workable point of view of the world, you're one of those people. And that is a valuable thing, like just how you see the world. Because look, anybody can have any take that they want. Some takes are more accurate than others. And the takes that are more accurate than others are the ones that are getting closer to reality as opposed to the other ones. It's that, what I'm looking for. And so, no, you've been fantastic with it. So
just consider me your local black pill pusher.
So the U.S. has done what I expected the U.S. to do, enter the war. In real terms, look, as I've made the argument to my audience that this is about empire. None of these conflicts are disparate things, like they're not separate. The U.S. did what they can to go after this notion of multipolarity by going after Russia and Ukraine. That didn't work. They looked at Iran. They've been trying to go after Iran for the last 20-something years. When Syria fell, they had their opportunity to do so, and they took it. And they thought, I would imagine in their mind, that Israel could carry the burden on their own because Donald Trump is not that bright. And when it became clear, oh, wait, Tel Aviv is getting hit constantly. Haifa is basically a ghost town. People are fleeing in droves. We must now get involved under this nonsense of Iran's trying to build a nuke. Give me your analysis of this as a geopolitical analyst. And how do you see it? You may see this differently than I do. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I do see this a bit differently.
Please.
And we have had, I would say, following Donald Trump's quote unquote truths is, of course, I would say a better way of following the man than anything else. I mean, better than press releases. I mean, obviously, that is what he wants us to know. But I think he often inadvertently lets more reality, I don't want to say truth, more reality, more of what he's really thinking through his truths than we might get through his officials, right? Whom, Mark Rubio,
these people
I don't think anything of the man, but of course he knows how to lie better than Donald Trump.
Yes, Trump is a bad liar. Agreed. Agreed.
So right after the attack on Iran, right, we have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Okay, that's entirely actually, unconfirmed, up in the air. At this point, the Iranians themselves probably still don't know the actual condition because it will obviously take them time to burrow back underground and determine the state of these. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. There are some that say they were never in Iran airspace. I have no way of
verifying that one way or the other. Right.
Of that one way or another at the moment. A full payload of bombs, big screaming capital letters. I just the words that he chooses to capitalize is I believe, I mean, it would provide a psychologist with an endless amount of material. Books could be written. A payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site for Dow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Well, that's also debatable. Now is the time for peace. I've bombed you. Screaming capital letters. Now is the time for peace. Now, I don't think that that's so much a contradiction in Orwellianism, such as it is the simple way that business is done. That is Donald Trump's art of the deal, right? That is, you agree to what I say,
just so
or
clear.
I break your leg and burn down your cousin's house. I mean,
so you don't think that they're trying to overthrow the government? I think this was always the plan.
I do.
Oh, okay.
I do. I absolutely do. Right? I mean, his art of the deal, he's made his demands, right? Unconditional surrender.
Right.
I mean, that's what he's demanded in a previous truth. So since then, however, we have had another truth that gets to the very heart of the matter you just raised, of course. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change. In fact, just what was it, a month ago, 2 months ago, you yourself were speaking about how the era of regime change is over. I mean, people were talking about the Trump doctrine, right? Regime change is over. The U.S. has turned over a new leaf. And I was like, yeah, okay. You believe that?
Not so much.
Yeah,
Not so
okay.
much.
But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, all screaming capital letters, why wouldn't there be a regime change? 3 question marks. MEGA, make Iran great again, I suppose. 3 exclamation marks. All right, so this type of unhinged, right? Now, of course, there's 2 ways the Iranians can treat this, right? One, it's a threat of what could happen, or it's what will happen, regardless of what they do, right?
Right.
So the Iranians have a tough choice. National dignity, the national dignity of any state requires retaliation. They've just been attacked, an act of war. I mean, the U.S. was already deeply militarily involved in the Israeli attacks, but this is, actual bombs dropped by actual Americans, the actual planes, right? So
I don't think they're going to attack, Mark.
What?
I don't think they're going to hit back.
Oh, I don't think they're going to hit back either. I don't, not directly, because on the off chance, and I consider it an off chance, right, that the U.S. wouldn't continue for regime change anyway, that would be giving those in the Trump administration screaming loudly for it exactly what they want. I mean, but that's the whole point.
Right there. We are on the same mind on this. We are on the same mind. Yeah.
And where I disagree from you earlier, is you think that there was an attempt for Israel to succeed in taking out the nuclear plants, and when they couldn't finish the job, America decided to come in.
No, not the nuclear plants. I don't think this has anything to do with nuclear missiles at all.
Yeah. My good friend and colleague, Brian Berletic, has been trying to hammer into our collective audience's minds the 2009 Brookings plan for regime change in Iran, which path to Persia, endlessly. I mean, ad nauseum. Correctly, but ad nauseum, he has attempted. So I'm going to take up the standard here, because I believe that paper exactly lays out the policies that we're seeing now, and a false attempt at diplomacy to provide diplomatic cover for the United States, and then opening up with an Israeli attack that would then allow the U.S. to be
involved.
Oh, dragged into another conflict, right?
Yep.
Because the U.S. is always dragged into conflicts, right?
Yep.
Against their will, right? That is what we're seeing here, right? There is a
Agreed.
plan, right? Now, whether Donald Trump himself has read Which Path to Persia and is following it is inadvertent. The U.S. deep state has long since internalized this.
Agreed.
And when they present policy options to their commander-in-chief, everything is bent on following this playbook. I mean, and it's not just this document, of course. This document lays it out in stunningly obvious, but it is more a deeply ingrained policy towards Iran, just like there's a similar policy towards Russia, right? Most recently, this overextending Russia, the Rand paper in what was it, 2019, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the playbook for overextending Russia in not just Ukraine, but they're near abroad, the former Soviet states and everything. Just like there are similar policy papers for China, and a multitude of other countries that you can line up.
Right.
So yes, the whatever Iran does or not does, if they choose not to escalate, doubtless in a week or two, some combination of the Americans and Israelis will get bored or not be able to wait anymore, and they'll either create a pretext and blame Iran for it, false flag stuff, or they'll just go ahead and do it anyway, because who really cares at this point, right? The Western media, this right, Iranian weapons of mass destruction is the new Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. And the Western mainstream media got fully behind that 20 years ago. But now they're even more fully behind this, such that the obvious fact that there was no Iranian nuclear weapon, there was not even any Iranian nuclear weapons program, testified by the Director of National Intelligence, testified by the International Atomic Energy, but they repeat those words, nuclear bomb, again and again. The same dumb weapons of mass destruction pretext.
We don't,
with not even the figment of Colin Powell, right, at the United Nations, right, holding up vials of cocaine or whatever the hell he was holding up, right?
It's amazing.
There's not even an attempt, a serious attempt, at presenting evidence this time. And the Western mainstream media is cheerleading it. They're salivating at the bit. They're like, finally, we've been waiting 30 years for an American president to regime change Iran. It sucks that it's Trump. It would have been better if it was Biden, but we'll get behind this. And that's going on right now. I mean, that's why they call it the fourth estate. The media is an ideological exceptionalist, right? Pro-hegemony part of the American government. I mean, they aren't elected to office. They're not a permanent state, but they have their own sense
ideological
of
uniformity
lines, funding, by the oligarchs that run the various newspapers and media outlets and so on. They are a part of the process. And in fact, one can certainly argue that in Ukraine, they have often been the whip snapping whenever there's not enough weapons being delivered or not enough escalation going on. Why aren't you delivering this? Why aren't you delivering that? Right there, if anything, it is the media that you should have as much, if not more, contempt for as the agents of empire hegemony. I try not to use the word empire. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's accurate in its way, but I find that over the Cold War, the term imperialism has lost its cachet, its ability to punch home what a horrible force it is. and that's why I have gone to using hegemony. But you used empire before.
Yeah, I use. I mean,
That's
either
perfectly
works.
accurate. That's perfectly the same thing. That's what we're talking here.
No, I agree with
So
you. I don't think that there's a
Iran is
disagreement in regards to what's going on. Please continue. I'm sorry.
Iran is damn whatever they do, most likely, right? If they restrain themselves, right, out of hopes that the U.S. will not immediately escalate the regime change. The U.S. almost certainly will anyway, or Israel will create the pretext for them to do so. But that doesn't mean that they should jump into that abyss and attack
Agreed.
the U.S. directly anyway, right? There are options, right, for some type of face-saving retaliation at this point. One, do nothing, and likely the same things will happen. They could fire missiles, drones at one of the unoccupied U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria, because the U.S. has evacuated several bases in both countries in the run-up to this attack, right? Clearly signaling to anyone who was paying attention that that's what they were going to do. Donald Trump, once again, nonsense about 2 weeks and all of that. It's some pathetic attempt at lulling the Iranians once again into a false sense of having time. They could interfere with the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, now that's their nuclear option. Now, there's been all sorts of reports in the alt media, in the social media, the alt media, over the last 24 hours that the mining of the Strait of Hormuz has begun. I have seen no evidence to that regard.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't have any evidence of that.
I've
also seen radio signals. I've seen jamming.
Yes, that's another thing that we've seen. We've seen arguments that there's heavy electronic warfare jamming of the GPS signals, which is creating chaos and confusion between thousands of ships moving in and out that rely on it for navigation. But I haven't seen any confirmation of that either. Right. So they're not impossible, but I would think you would have seen something about that right now. Anyway, that's of course an option. A third option is to have their quote unquote proxies, right, the axis of resistance, strike back against the U.S. for them, right? Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq. I did see a single mortar was fired onto an American military base in the past 24 hours. I'm not sure that quite arises to the level of retaliation for bombing with V2 Spirit bombers. Right? The problem with the others is, right, the Houthis, they're in it. They're still flinging an occasional missile in the direction of Israel, but they've been badly mauled. They survived, which, to their credit, the U.S. threw up their hands and said it's not worth it. It's not worth the cost. And, Trump declared victory and they sailed away. But their ability to significantly attack either Israel or the United States is limited. Let's be clear about that. Hezbollah, the same thing. They were mauled badly. You can see all the pieces falling into place leading up to the attack in Iran. Each member of the axis of resistance was dealt with, right? Agreed. Hezbollah's in bad state. They survived, but their leadership was decapitated terribly, exposing all sorts of holes and moles and Mossad within their organization. Hamas is still fighting for their survival in an increasingly genocidal starvation siege of Gaza. And Syria is gone. It's Al-Qaeda-stan now, baby. It's the literal Islamic State reborn. So that was the essential piece, right? There goes all of Syria's Russian-provided and Russian air defense systems that were absolute. Clearing that was essential to clearing the way. In fact, it was just about 6 months from the overthrow of the government in Syria and its literal takeover by ISIS, Al-Qaeda. Giuliani was both, and the Israeli bombing of whatever air defense was left and not transferred by Turkey to Ukraine, whatever. I mean, that is what has sustained the Kiev regime over the last few months. Is the U.S. Well, Turkey did it, but with U.S. I'm sure provoking and providing money and the like. All of the Russian military equipment, right? Russian, Soviet, whatever was there that had been given to Syria over the years leading right up to, well, this last year, Russia now had to fight again because it was provided to the Kiev regime in Ukraine.
Can I stop you there for 1 second?
Yeah.
Isn't this an indication that appeasement doesn't work and that all things being equal, they should have opened all hell on Israel when Syria was still in existence, when Iran was intact, meaning they watch as one device of the resistance got decapitated after the next, as if that monster wasn't rummaging the countryside, eventually going to knock on their door.
Yeah, I'm not so sure appeasement against Israel. That might have been too close for the U.S., right? And Israel only ever played a bit role in what happened in Syria. The big appeasement was with Erdogan, right? That was the fatal.
Oh, you illip.
Yeah, the trusting of Erdogan with the Astana agreement and letting them in Idlib and letting. I believe that was the biggest flaw. I don't necessarily think that it would have been smart for Russia to go after Israel. I don't think there's any. Yeah,
I'm not saying Russia. Yeah. I'm saying Iran watched, meaning there was.
Iran, yeah, as well. Yeah, they watched Iran, decapitate Hezbollah and did nothing. And now when Hezbollah doesn't stir as Iran is being bombed, I mean. Well, there's a reason for that. One, they lack the capability now. Two, exactly. Why would they? I mean, did Israel step up for Hezbollah? No, they didn't. I mean, the axis of resistance is a two-way street. I mean, they may still get into this, but I mean, it raises a lot of questions. And Pezeshkian, man, Picard, epic double facepalm, right? I mean. Because Putin last week revealed to us at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum something that I was completely unaware of, that the recent strategic partnership that Russia and Iran had signed had no military defense clauses whatsoever. It was entirely economic and political.
I brought this up to you. That Dugin said this.
He did. Right. I remembered that. And when Putin said that, I'm like, I had a conversation with someone this week, and they asked me about Dugin saying this, and I said I didn't think it was likely, and I didn't, right? And I didn't think that Dugin had any specific knowledge, but Putin further spilled the beans directly himself. So there's no denying it now, and I was wrong. I mean, undoubtedly wrong. And
I was mystified by that.
Wrongness is in obviously overestimating the Iranian government.
What the hell are they thinking? I got to be honest with you. I was mystified by that. When Putin said that, my mouth hit the floor like, oh, what is wrong with you?
So first, Russia offered them a mutual defense pact, similar to what they have just signed with North Korea. And they said, thanks, but no thanks.
Yep.
And then Russia said, well, or we could cooperate on air defense. We could help build you an air defense and electronic warfare, interconnected, multi-layered defense system like we have. We could even do production in Iran, and you could be hooked up to our own air defense radar networks, right? I mean, and Iran said, thanks, but no thanks. And evidently, according to I haven't heard any denials from Iran at this point. I'm not sure it's their priority denying things like this at this point, of course. But again, what was put out was that they hoped naive as F to placate and improve relations with the West. And evidently Pezeshkian was elected as a moderate, as a reformist, on a policy of wanting to improve relations with the West. So they feared that Russia, already involved in a war with NATO de facto in Ukraine, that any alignment with Russia would ruin their non-existent chances for improving relations with the West.
He can't be that naive.
They held off on it. They said, no, we're okay. No, you're not okay. And if they had signed a mutual defense pact with Russia, that would unofficially put Russia's nuclear as well as conventional umbrella over Iran, and Israel would have never dared strike. Right
Mark,
there.
This explains why Putin was so annoyed at that conference. Yeah. And when they were asking him, your responsibility to Iran, he was like, effectively, what do you want me to do?
Oh yeah. It's the same feeling I had with what happened in Syria. Like, we were fighting, we were ready to go, we were sending more, and their military just was co-opted and bought out and threw down their weapons and ran away, and we couldn't fight the war entirely for them, right? I mean, that was the same feeling of frustration, that everything in the Middle East is built on sand, right? That just washes away.
How is he that naive?
He specifically said that Iran was difficult to help, difficult to be friends with. And now, of course, the Iranian foreign minister today is in Moscow meeting with Putin personally. But
please help me.
I had thought that over the last 6 months, Russia was already beginning the work of building. I mean, everyone believed that, right? This is the first time that we have heard that they weren't. We were all under the assumption. It might have taken a long time, but we believed it. And no, there was nothing. So now, the statements from Peskov about, so far that we've heard from the meetings is it all depends on what the Iranians want, what they ask for. And Putin also said that up till now, like in the last week plus of the war, they still haven't asked for anything from Russia. Now,
Mark,
do we then believe that they're getting something from China? I don't believe that either, because Russia would, be more, I believe, politically willing to, provide arms or intelligence or something in that regard. So, and Putin and Xi Jinping had an hour-and-a-half conversation about what was happening in Iran last week. So Russia and China are coordinating, but Iran hasn't coordinated, certainly with Russia, over the last week plus, since this attack began. And Russia's like, and I continually hear and have to deal with people online who are doubtless justified and outraged, right, over what is happening to Iran, but then trying to shift the blame onto Russia. Why isn't Putin doing this? Putin is, a female's genital part, right? He never wants to fight, right, and everything. And what do you expect of the man? I mean, he offered them the world, right, in this particular situation. And they said, no, we think we can do a deal with Trump. I'm like, are you mad? And this fatal conceit, you cannot. I mean, the supreme leader of Iran said it, not in the last 6 months, that diplomacy with the United States is pointless, right? That it will never achieve anything. And yet they walked back into that. And twice.
So the supreme leader is not the supreme leader.
Well, I mean, he's certainly not a total dictator. That is, I mean, the reality is, of course, that no one in the Western media is that Iran has an extremely complicated political system with it really, you have to sit down in poli-sci classes to understand the system of checks and balances and competing factions that the Iranian government has, within their political system. It's a little, it takes some effort to map it out. It's complicated. It is not a mullah dictatorship by the supreme leader's will, whatever anyone in the Western, media wants to portray it as. And once again, they're a prickly nation. They have, justifiably, they have a millennia of existence, laid out in their history. And yes, the previous iterations of the, the Romanov Empire, the Soviet Union have had sore spots in relations with Iran. Everyone has history, but no, that's not entirely true, because Russia had agreed to transfer air defense systems to Iran a decade ago, and Medvedev became president in Russia. And that was one of the phases where Russia was trying to ingratiate itself in the West. And they withheld those air defense systems for years before they finally transferred them. That was in around 2010. That was a period. So maybe there's a reason why you can't blame them in even recent history, with current leadership at different levels being involved then as well. But the lesson that everyone should take home, whether you're Iran here or whether you're Russia with past mistakes that may have helped prejudice Iran here, you can't do diplomacy. You can't appease the beast. The hegemon will come for you when you're prepared or when you're unprepared. They will come. Nothing will avert them from that. That their goal is power, right? Global power. And any independent sovereign country that doesn't kowtow and bandwagon with that hegemony will and is targeted.
My rage in this moment is it's off the scale. My rage in this moment is off the scale.
And Pezeshkian, from everything that has happened since, first of all, I completely do not now believe at all that Raisi's death was a tragic helicopter accident. Let's make that clear. Everything that Pezeshkian had, I'm sorry to my Iranian friends, most of you actually probably agree with me anyway, but Pezeshkian has been the biggest disaster for Iran if he's the one who has taken the lead on these decisions.
He has.
These decisions not to escalate back against attacks on Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis that occurred while the whole axis of resistance, what the 2 volleys of attacks that Israel made earlier this year, the refusal to sign a mutual defense treaty with Russia. God knows what was offered by China, right? That they're not being as open about at this point. But, it's more than likely that there was something there as well. Pezeshkian has been the biggest disaster for this country. And that fatal belief that you could appease the beast, that you could, it takes a complete debasement of your national sovereignty and your way of looking at the world to be accepted as a vassal of the U.S. hegemon. And all you have to do is look at the current slate of of European political leaders who hate Trump to a bone, but bow and lick his posterior at every opportunity. That level of debasement is what is required.
I don't understand how you could be that naive. Like that is a startling level of naivety. Like you sit there and you watch them take out Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. You watch them
Syria.
go after Syria. Literally for years go after Syria. They take down Lebanon. They're killing people in mass. And you sit there and watch that and you're like, we can make a deal. Like, what the hell is wrong?
I guess it's the boiling frog, right? That you just it's happening incrementally, piece by piece, and the specter of conflict with the United States is serious. The U.S. is still right. They're not unrivaled, but I
get it. But the monster is rummaging through the city. Like it's almost as if you had a city somewhere and the monster is rummaging through the countryside and you can see the trees fall as the monster goes through. And you sit in there thinking to yourself, nah, I'm okay. It's that.
He's still on my neighbor's. He's on my neighbor's house.
Yeah.
He won't come this way.
I'll be okay. I can make a deal with him. That is infuriating. The notion that Russia is like, you don't have a nuke. And Russia's saying, we'll give you, you'll be under a nuclear shield. We'll have a security partnership.
Well, that wasn't said, but it's right ever,
implied.
Right? People wouldn't say that. But I mean, obviously, if there's a mutual defense pact and Russia has nuclear weapons, even if it's not explicitly said, which I believe it wouldn't be, there is an unofficial extension there, obviously, over it. And Medvedev, the new Zhirinovsky, the new firebrand, he specifically in a very long, detailed tweet said that there are multiple countries willing to transfer nuclear weapons to Iran at this point. Now,
that they won't accept.
Okay. Well, he didn't say that.
I'm saying Iran is saying they won't accept it.
Yeah. Okay. So I do now there's a lot of bluster and bluff and hot air that comes off of Medvedev, right? A lot of it is simply meant to be morale building, the voice of the common Russian in this regard. Not that Medvedev has ever been the common Russian, but whatever. I appreciate some of his sentiments, right? Even if I take them with a grain of salt. But this is one of those things that I don't think would be an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I think that is perfectly serious. Whether he's talking Pakistan, whether he's talking North Korea, or whether he's talking Russia, right? There's always he doesn't specify which countries, right? He specifically brings it up. And maybe not. I mean, I don't think Putin would do that, to be perfectly honest. But maybe there are people within the Kremlin who are like, and John Mearsheimer himself has argued that the single greatest stabilizing factor that could stabilize the Middle East is to provide Iran with a nuclear weapon to even out Israel's possession of the nuclear weapons, which of course is against, international law and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But the West, maintains this collective fiction for decades that they don't have. Well, they don't say they don't have them. No one will ever talk about it. I mean, it's this game. So I'm frustrated. I'm exasperated. I agree with you. I mean, the Russian government has never been faultless. I've criticized them many times over the last decade, as I'm sure you're well aware. But I mean, you got to put the onus here on the Iranian government, right? And if it's Pezeshkian and them closer to him, then that man is the biggest disaster for this country. I mean, the Western media loves bringing up the specter of the appeasement of Nazi Germany, right? In World War II. Everything is World War II. Anytime you talk to an opponent, it's the appeasement of Nazi Germany in 1938 all over again. But
Pezeshkian is that guy. He's
is that guy. Pezeshkian is. I'm afraid he is. I mean, I don't know 100%, but everything that I've heard is that Pezeshkian, and I'm sure it's not just him, right? I'm sure there is a political faction within the Iranian government, within the Iranian oligarchy, within the Iranian religious establishment that thought this. And right now, this son of the last dictator Shah that the U.S. installed in Iran that led to the Islamic Revolution, right? He's parading himself. He's come out of his abode in the United States in New York, and this morning he was in Paris, telling the Ayatollah Khomeini that if he surrendered, he would be given a free trial, and saying outright that regime change is now. I mean, that creature. I mean, like, the last thing that Iranians need or want, is another monarch installed by the son of the last dictator installed by the U.S. and Iran, U.S. and the U.K. We can't forget the fading British Empire's role in that particular horror show in Iran, the toppling of the Mossadegh government, the democratically elected socialist government of Iran, that led to this whole decades long, right up to the conflagration we're in now.
Mark, I have to be honest with you. It's taken me a bit to kind of digest this.
I've just been kind of like, well, what now? I mean, like,
because you're right. People were screaming at Putin, like, "Oh my God, what are you going to do?" And they're screaming at China, "Oh my God, what are you going to do? You're going to let the government fall?" And people like me, and even up Dr. Sarah Bills for DT Geopolitics, and we're like, there's a level of, I'm not going to say freaked out, but we live here, so we have a clear understanding. Okay, these people are sociopaths, and you're dealing with sociopaths. They don't care about this notion of diplomacy. What diplomacy have you seen take place through the Middle East? They've murdered all of these people. Think of the number of people they killed. Why are you in a glass vase? You're not. You are and will be destroyed. They will turn you into a failed state. We get it. And so the common sense for us is, well, obviously you need to work with Russia and China. All of them are in a similar situation. So we assumed that this collaboration was effectively taking place. And then you hear Putin effectively say, look, man, we tried to offer them help. They didn't want it, which is a blow to us, like saying, okay, maybe Iran has something under their sleeve for their. No, they don't. And this conversation brings it down to they believe that they can negotiate with monsters. And you think to yourself, how are they this radically naive? And that is a blow.
I heard the tail end of your good conversation with Kofi before I came on, and I heard you talking about how, I mean, this is a clear violation of international law, of the UN Charter, of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, how they have no right to do this. They have no right to decide who, the government of Iran is. Well,
I just believe international law exists.
It's pointless because we live in a brutal, realist, cynical world where might makes right.
To be clear, Mark, that wasn't my argument to Kofi. My argument to Kofi was that stuff doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Those things were power structures under just to maintain power for Europe and America, not in reality. That something needs to come into fruition that replaces that, because it's
a fiction that is agreed upon and actually enacted when it's convenient for everyone to do so, and when it's not, it's just a fig leaf hiding the brutal reality of the world of international relations. And Trump screaming in childish all capital letters about regime change in Iran and killing the leader of Iran, the Ayatollah. That is the world we live in, right? That is the unparalleled. And the one thing that Trump does is make that a lot more obvious than other U.S. administrations. I mean, the crassness is its own burden to bear, of course, but he just does what previous administrations put a much more PR controlled face on, Biden, Obama, and others. So this is the unparalleled.
My argument to Kofi was that stuff doesn't exist.
That
it just doesn't exist, and that any notion of peace is going to have to be taken at the barrel of a gun. And I think that's true in Ukraine. I think that would be true in Iran. And this idea of, and because what we were talking about was BRICS, that the goal seems to be to strangle it in the crib.
Yep.
And that whether it's going after Russia or whether it's going after Iran or whether it's this pivot to China, that they believe that taking out these things would effectively destroy any notion of multipolarity coming into fruition.
They thought they were going to take out Russia, right? They thought Russia was the weak link that they were going to take out. I mean, that was the Biden administration plan in 2022, provoke Russia, and we'll take care of them and then pivot to China. Well, that didn't work out so well. Yeah, now they're like, well, Iran looks a bit weaker right now, so we'll back off the Russia stuff and go after Iran. And that's what they're doing. And Iran is absolutely essential to China's One Belt, One Road, right? Their vision of economically linking Eurasia. And that a pro-U.S. installed dictator in Iran would be a significant strategic threat to Russia's quote-unquote soft underbelly in the Caucasus and the Caspian.
What do you think Aragachi is talking to Putin about? Because Putin says, God, man, this is bringing so much more context to me. This is elucidating so much and is doing it in real time, which is screwing with me in regards to my questions. All right, so that explains a lot. It explains why Putin was annoyed when they kept saying, what are you doing for Iran? It explains when Putin pointed out, look, they didn't want our help. We asked them 3 times. They didn't want our help. It explains the meeting that Putin is having with Aragachi, where Putin says, okay, let's see how we can get you out of this situation. And Aragachi looked into the camera and had this look like this mother, this MF. But he had this look of kind of like, what do you mean getting us out of this situation? Well, from Putin's point of view, you put yourself in this situation. You did this. We asked you over and over again to let us help you because we understood that you were a vital part of this multipolarity, and you decided you wanted to go bare-chested and go alone.
Hey, now, this straw house you built, it doesn't look so solid.
It doesn't.
We could add a brick foundation here. No, the wolf and I are good friends. Don't worry about it.
Right.
I don't need that.
Right. And so now you're here with the U.S. having just attacked you.
But there's much
in the middle
less
of a war.
Russia can do now. Russia can't build an air defense network. Even overnight. 6 months, right, wasn't enough time. But they could have started, right? You can't train people to operate Russia's air defense systems now, right? I mean, that's like the U.S. handing off weapons to the Kiev regime and expecting them to use them properly on the battlefield, right?
F-16s or a good example. Yeah.
And does that mean, Russia at this point is not going to send troops to Iran. They're still engaged in an existential conflict with Iran. We could hope that China will step up, right? Obviously Russia and China are cooperating. We can hope that China will step up at this point to protect what it is an absolutely essential, piece of not just the multipolar world, right? Russia, China foundation, right? But Iran is the next building block, right? The next essential building block onto vital, there. Right. That everything else will be, is in BRICS plus and so on. Is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is tagged on as, multi-vector institutions of multipolarity. But
protect them how is the question.
Yeah. And
what is Aragachi asking Putin for?
I'm sure they're discussing, first of all, what do you want? And then how realistically can we help you? I'm sure they're talking more than just militarily, of course, but they can't avoid talking about the military needs right now as well. Iran's in a bad place. They're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't right now. And I just cannot believe that the U.S. is going to back off now.
Of course not.
I
never believed that they were going to back off. This is 20 years in the making. This is the culmination of the crisis point that they wanted.
The question then going forward is, what is the plan for regime change? Because bombing Tehran and other Iranian cities, whether by Israel or Israel and the U.S. alone, is not enough, right? The government isn't just going to magically go away. So what is the network of Mossad connected terrorists, mercenaries, separatists, the Baluchi separatists, the Azeri separatists, the U.S.'s Mujahideen Kalk rabid dog that's still chilling on the chain in Albania, right? What is their plan to unleash? Maybe they don't have a plan. Maybe they don't. And neocons often don't think these things through, but they have options at the very least, because that is, yes, the missile strikes, U.S. bombings of Iranian cities will help set the stage. They'll help weaken political, social, economic, foundations of the state, and provide room for something within to strike. Because no one, even in the West, is yet talking about putting U.S. troops on the ground in Iran. That doesn't seem like it. I mean, at some point, I'm sure Lindsey Graham will start screaming about it eventually. But if things aren't going their way, but right now it is going to be the covert regime change. And remember how the Syrian government fell. Remember how the Libyan government fell. At the end of the day, Libya was resisting all of this European bombing. And when the Americans joined in, they were still doing it until the covert operations with Qatari backing went in on the ground, and they co-opted the commander of the defense of Tripoli to just stand down and open the gates of the city, right? That is what happened there. In Iraq, right, in 2003. Once again, the majority of the Iraqi army was compromised and co-opted and bought out and stood down. It is only a small portion of the Iraqi military that actually fought when the Americans went in on the ground, right? Because there was that month-long bombing campaign and U.S. intelligence. So always they seek to rot the house from within, and then it just needs a push to fall it over. So what is their covert, unconventional warfare plan for regime change in Iran? Because that is the real threat, not all the tomahawks and massive ordnance penetrators dropped on a country the size of Iran with 90 million people. It is the regime change operations that are launched from within that are the real threat. And hopefully they can, Putin and the Ragchi and the Chinese and whoever can sit down and figure out what those are and how they can be stopped.
I guess that explains why Putin was like, all right, let's see if we can get you out of this.
Yeah, I mean, you're
basically in deep shit, and I'm trying to help you out.
The military acronym, FUBAR, take prominent. F up beyond all recognition. It's in a bad place. And I know people in all media have been crowing and with every Iranian missile that's falling on Israel, and I feel it, right? I feel a bit of schadenfreude, but I think there's too many people exaggerating the damage that Iran is doing and downplaying the damage that is being done to Iran right now.
As somebody who plays those videos, I would say, look, I think from my point of view, if this is a war of attrition, where one side is attacking, basically, if Iran and Israel are exchanging,
if it was just going to be a long-range strike war of attrition against Israel, but it's already not that now.
Right. The U.S. is now involved. The U.S. will get further involved. And
if the U.S. is involved, the U.K. is involved.
Right.
And France is involved. And other governments in the Middle East, right? There's a lot of Arab governments appear to be trying to sit on the fence, but
I don't believe them.
Jordan, it's certainly involved. And I don't believe Turkey for a freaking second, no matter what kind
Erdogan
of
is a
domestic
snake.
pandering statements that Erdogan is playing out, right? And he can talk smack about Israel every time he wants, but he has done nothing, less than nothing. He's behind the scenes. He's fully in bed. He's a member of NATO. And it was a fatal mistake for Russia and Iran to ever trust him in Syria. I said
Agreed.
so 20, when was it, 2019?
Yeah. You ended up being right. It's just shocking to me. The more I hear about this stuff, the more shocking it gets. Like, I agree with you. The internal divisions is the thing that they seem to be going after with all of these Mossad agents. It's almost like their security.
That's why they're bombing today. Look at the Iranian or the Israeli airstrikes. They're all on Tehran. That is regime change setting the stage. That is weakening the government in Tehran, not to force them to give up nuclear enrichment, but for regime change.
Last question. Why do you think that Iran doesn't respond in kind? Like, meaning they would hit Tel Aviv, but these are the Dimona nuclear facility still up. They said they had plans of where they knew where the Israelis were keeping their thing. Meaning, why don't they turn that place to glass? They seem to be very restrained, and I don't quite get that. Considering
you sound like my dad does that.
What? Oh, he thinks the same.
No, well, I know he would talk more about the U.S. gleefully they would turn that country into a glass parking lot. All those ragheads, right? I mean, that's not.
I'm an American. This is what we think.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not on the same political spectrum as my father, thank God. But anyway, so two things come to mind, right? The first one is Iran has real limitations, right? They are not as weak as Israel and others tried to present them, but neither are they strong enough, right, to
inflict their will,
wipe out Israel with long-range strikes. Let's just put it that way. Two, a fear of escalation with the United States. There's always that fear. And at the end of the day, they don't even, right? That's where we're at now, right? But let's say it stayed just about Israel, right? And the U.S. really didn't get involved. That they actually had an America first, foreign policy, as it was, some people tried to present them as having.
right?
And U.S. said, "Oh, not our war. We're not getting involved." If Iran hurt Israel bad enough, like replying in kind, hitting the Dumana nuclear plant, and creating some type of nuclear Chernobyl situation there, then Israel would just hit back with nuclear weapons.
Then Iran shouldn't be in this fight.
Yeah, they did. It's not their choice. They did not choose this fight. They've tried not to have this fight, but they're on the chopping block. I
get that, but Israel can make that line anywhere. Meaning they could say, "Well, we don't like you hitting this, so if you hit this, we're going to go to nukes."
Yes,
like meaning God,
that's
man,
why
I
it's
do
so
not
dangerous. Israel having nukes. Yes,
I don't get the thinking of Iranian government. I swear to God, I don't. It makes no sense to me. Everybody, whether it was me, you, Brian, other people out there pointing out the U.S. is a group of sociopaths. They're obviously trying to reshape the Middle East with American power, using a proxy to do it, every bit as much as they're using Ukraine or Taiwan as a proxy. Why are you being left to your own devices? And you find out.
I want to close out talking about the smartest man in the room.
Mark Sleboda?
No, by far. Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
He develops a strategic deterrent of nuclear weapons. He maintains and extends a powerful conventional military. He creates economic and military alliances with Russia that extend Russia's protection against the United States. North Korea is more economically, politically, and strategically stable today than it ever has been, right? Since the Korean War.
Yeah.
I mean, since it ever has been. right? And he did that by having, yes, he was happy to flirt with Trump, but he never was lulled into any false sense of vulnerability by him. Today, no one in the United States talks about regime changing or even striking North Korea. They built the type of deterrent, strategic, nuclear, meaning militarily and diplomatically, politically, and provided the economic foundation, getting themselves out of economic isolation with Russia. That was needed. If Iran 6 months ago had followed that same course of interconnection, look at the multipolar world countries are all targeted. And unless they create real military alliances, real economic and military linkages with each other, then they will be pulled apart and picked off.
That was my conversation with Kofi. That was the same thing we said in the conversation. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find Mark on Boosty at Real Politics with Mark Sleboda, or if you put in his name, the man is brilliant and he knows his stuff. Mark, thank you.
Obviously, Kofi does too. You guys were just rehashing the same thing.
Well, yeah, that was kind of an argument. Like, the BRICS nations are being picked off. Don't they realize that you need a military? Like, basically, peace is taken at the barrel of a gun. It's not just because you're, peaceful.
And to be fair, not all the BRICS is often talked about. I mean, a lot of the BRICS nations really don't want conflict with the India, Brazil, the foremost of the bunch. But even Qatar hosts U.S. bases. UAE hosts U.S. bases. Saudi Arabia still. Are we in BRICS? Are we not? Dancing on the fence.
It's not that simple. There's divisions.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I mean, we talk about BRICS, but it's not BRICS. It's not what you think it is.
Thank you, Mark. You be safe, man. You have a good one, okay?